100 years ere seed sown. Truth was twisted, its seeds were grown. Break the lies, spark the mission. Welcome to Quranic Inquisition.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Peace of the Lord to all of you. Shalom, assalamu alaikum, namaste. We are back to talk about more biblical theme in the Quran with our brother, non-inverted inquisitor, John. Hello, John. How are you doing today?
Oh, going good. Yep, good as always. And yeah, trying to stay faithful to the theme each time. So bit of a laugh here and there. So all I can say is we are going to be wrapping up our theme of the mysterious Muhammad or Muhammad, and I think everyone's going to see that it's really going to come together with this last installment. Yeah, and I'm sure everyone had a bit of fun with their homework in our last recording. And yeah, we're going full scorched earth with this last one, because you're really not going to see things the way that people want us to. So yeah, we got a lot of fun ahead of us.
Great, and your title is quite puzzling, so I am looking forward to see where you're actually going to take this one. So do you want to, well, the floor is yours if you would like to do maybe a very quick recap of some of the things that you have discussed during this series, and then jump
Yes.
on the topic whenever you're ready.
Yeah. So what is it? The last thing so the last three passages we've looked at. So we basically looked at so we've gone in descending order. If you've noticed, or if anyone's noticed, we started with chapter 48 and pretty much the last verse of 48, but we included the Masjid al-Haram, and we said we're going to take it for granted that that's referring to the Jerusalem temple, because then it does give us an identity of who this Muhammad is, and we stated straight up that it's the resurrected Jesus, the Messiah. So in all these episodes, we're basically looking at how chapter 355 is first fulfilled, because Jesus has fulfilled his mission, and therefore all who follow him are made the uppermost, because as Jesus is the victor, so are those who follow him. And we're going to see that that's exactly what each of these four passages are all about. So we did 48, and then the second one was chapter 47, 1 to 9, and we had a lot of fun with that one. Because in both 48 and 47, there's a very strong theme about forgiveness or covering one's guilt. So or covering one's affront, all this language of biblical forgiveness and atonement. So this is very fishy straight up in and of itself. But then when you actually look at the biblical precedent behind it, there's it's just a case closed. But in all my presentations, what I'm doing is just presenting data. So and as always, you be the judge. And so that was the first two, 48 and 47, and you sort of see a bit of a theme. And we had a bit of fun practicing a little bit of textual criticism, where there was I think it was 47 verse 4, which is a very long verse in the middle of that passage that just stands out like an ugly thumb, a sore thumb. And so like we always have two options, because brother Odon LaFontaine, who you had a very lively stream with Brother Lloyd on his channel. He also said like it's a good idea to see if something could be a possible interpolation, where if any particular verse starts even within a single verse as well. For example, a classic one is chapter 61 verse 6. That whole thing about Ahmed. He reckons that could be a interpolation where it's added at a later date. And And so basically, look at the structure of the verses, and when you actually take it out, you can test by looking at the verse above and below it, and if it actually has a better flow, then it's a very strong indication that that verse, that interpolation wasn't there. And so 33, and then when we looked at that famous chapter 33, where it says like Muhammad was not the father of any of your men, we had a bit of a fun humor break where we were laughing about what is it, that very sweet old lady claiming to be the great descendant of Jesus, so please buy her camels, and the Da Vinci Code with all that nonsense. And we were just seeing how scripturally that passage actually has a lot of biblical, it has a very rich biblical background to it, because you've got, remember God, remember Allah in the virgin sunrise and in the sunset. And then we basically saw that was like a homily in Psalm 113. And then what else? It says like, Allah prays over you and his angels, which is very sweet of him, isn't it? But it says to bring you out of darkness into his light, or into the light. And that's Colossians. That's actually paraphrasing the Apostle Paul's writings in Colossians. And then there was even more biblical references within that. So yeah, you've got an interesting and the interesting thing about chapter 33 is that it doesn't talk about forgiveness explicitly there. Oh yeah, and the last part of chapter 33, it says, and their greeting on the day they meet him is peace. So even though forgiveness is not mentioned in that verse, you got to question, how can there be no forgiveness if you've gone from darkness into light, and then presumably you're greeting the day you meet God, or the day you meet the praised one, is peace. How can there be peace if you haven't been forgiven? So clearly forgiveness is implied, and when you look at those biblical passages, of course it's all there. So that's what we've covered in the last 3 passages, and this final 4th passage, you're going to really see a lot of we're really going to go through the Gospels, and you're just not going to see this passage the same way, this Quranic passage the same way anymore, which glory be to God. So any thoughts on what we've already covered in the past 3 episodes? I know Brother Lloyd says my brain hurts, but how about you, JC? How are you taking all this?
Well, I'm somewhat familiar with all of this already, so my head has been hurting now for a really long time because of studying this. But yes, I feel the pain. And yes, so far in the previous 3 sessions, you covered the other 3 verses of Muhammad. So Muhammad only appears 4 times by name in the Quran, and you have already unpicked the first 3. You would think that the person who gives the book, the most important person in the religion, would actually have his name in the book, in the hundreds of times, but no, 4 times. So it looks like you are ready to actually conclude this particular session with the 4th verse that mentions Muhammad. In theory, he should have been mentioned hundreds of times, and this session should take probably another 100 recordings. But it looks like they made the life easy for you, and you only had 4 verses to discuss, which is wonderful.
It is, yeah. And you know what? Far from our brains hurting, actually, it's very refreshing when we bring the Bible back into the Quranic text, because that's exactly what it was. The Quran itself says it's there to confirm, the Bible. So we're only doing what we're only reading, and we're just doing what it's telling us to do. So what more can they ask from us? But yeah. So in speaking of reading, how about I'll start by just reading the full passage first, and then we'll go one thing at a time, eh? What do you say?
Yeah, John, so do let me know if you want me to zoom in on particular areas or if you want me to move to the next slide or anything like this, and then I'll do my best to keep up.
Okay. All right. Nice. Well, actually, the good thing is you don't have to do anything at all. It's I'll just basically, for the benefit of the audience, I'm just going to read the passage and yeah, get stuck into it. So yeah, that's so we'll read from. So the passage is chapter 3, 144, and we're going to finish at 149 because you're going to be able to see the theme of it. It's going to be very self-evident. All right. So they're starting from 144, and Muhammad was not except a messenger. Messengers have already vacated from before him. So if he died or was killed, ye inverted over your heels, and whoever inverts over his 2 heels, then he will never harm Allah a thing, and Allah will soon apportion the thanking ones. 145. And it was not for a self to die, except by the orality of Allah, a termed writing. And whoever wills the requital of the one close by, we will advance him from it. And whoever wills the requital of the last one, we will advance him from it. And we will soon apportion the thanking ones. Verse 146. And as whereof a prophet many combated with him, so they did not become debile for what has targeted them in the way of Allah, and did not weaken and did not succumb themselves. And Allah loves the enduring ones. And then verse 147 to 149. Ooh. Okay. Yep, there we go. Okay. So 147. And their saying was not except that they have said, Our Lord, forgive for us our guilts and our excessiveness in our command, and stabilize our feet, and advocate us over the covering menfolk. 148. So Allah advanced them the requital of the one close by, and the goodness of requital of the last one, and Allah loves the good doers. O ye who believed, if you obey those who have covered, they will rebound you over your heels, then invert you into losers. So that's quite a lot to take in, isn't it?
That's quite a lot.
It is, especially that last bit. What a burn.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm not.
I see a lot of forgiveness in there. I cannot actually join the dots. I'm sure you have done it already, but it sounds like, okay, there's a lot about people being forgiven or what they have to do to be forgiven.
That's right. Yeah. So basically we just start from 144, but even just before we go there, we can basically see that there's quite a bit of repeated themes. So you can, the thing that makes for a simple task of doing your own Quranic analysis. So this is for the benefit of the audience, is take a chunk of what you're reading and try to look for repeated themes. So when it will be like, okay, inverted, okay, and then you'll see, okay, requital of the one close by, and then apportion the thanking ones, enduring ones, and then the last part it has the same repeated theme. So look for consistency, and then it's easier to work with when you we then take one theme at a time. And so, yeah, the language of forgiveness is very interesting because it's like forgive our guilts and our excessiveness. And look, it is what it is. Basically, it's taking a biblical theme of atonement, and it's always going to be connected to as we've seen in every other passage, is always connected to Muhammad, who we're going to say is the praised one, the most praised one, the resurrected Messiah, Jesus. And I'm going to go just show you through the Gospels and read them back into the verses so that you can completely see, well, how clear and coherent it will become when you take the Bible back into the Quranic text. Because you know, when we shut down the silly Islamic nonsense, all this modern Islam, and we take the Bible and read it through thematically, we're going to get much more coherence and a satisfying answer. So, are you ready? Is everyone ready?
I am ready. I'll be listening for the audience and say, everybody is ready. Come on, let's do this.
That's it. Yeah, come on, get on with it. Yeah. Okay. So what we're going to deal with is highlighted in the green at the top, and so I've just color coded it just to make it flow. So what I'm going to deal with is I'm going to unpack. The most praised one was not except a messenger, and then messengers have already vacated from before him, and I'm going to explain. And I feel like when I read this Bible passage out, I won't even need to say anything more, because it's just going to be so clear when we put text with text. So, as always, whenever you go do the homework yourself, I always recommend reading the full Bible passage, which is Matthew chapter 23. But what I'm going to do is read the last 3 verses of Matthew chapter 23. So, Matthew chapter 23, verse 37 to 39. And you'll see what I mean. So Jesus says in Matthew chapter 23, 37, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you who kill the prophets and stone those sent to you. How often I have longed to gather your children together as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, and you were not willing. Look, your house is left to you desolate. For I tell you, you will not see me again until you say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. So remember what we said in the very first episode we did, the first installment, which was chapter 48, where you had the Masjid al-Haram, which was the Jerusalem temple. And it said like the proximate opening is rendered apart from that. And then it speaks about the resurrected Jesus. So the most praised one is found in the Gospels and in the Torah. So when we look at 144, we see, look, the most praised one was not except a sent one, or a sent one. And then sent ones have already vacated from before him. And what do we hear Jesus saying here in about Jerusalem? You who kill the prophets and stone those who've been sent to you. So I don't know about you, but I mean, it's just very straightforward. Because then the next thing makes a lot more sense. Because when it says have already vacated from before him, it's almost a paraphrase of this passage in Matthew 23. Any thoughts on that, Brother JC?
Wow, well, lots of thoughts. So if we're looking at this as, okay, that is Muhammad there in Mecca or Yathrib, one of the two, and saying these things that are supposed to come from Allah, everything, yes, makes no sense. But based on everything that you have shown before, so we are now dealing with Jesus. And when we read this through that new lens, and we see then saying other messengers passed before, that takes us to the Bible. Jesus said those words exactly. Also, you discussed last time, I think it was in the verse in Surah 33, verse 40, Jesus is the seal of the prophets, according to the Quran. That's actually the whole theme. So Jesus saying this, other people have passed before, because this is said from a point of view of Jesus saying, this is what happens before, he's the seal of the prophets, and he's going to send the Spirit. So everything starts to make sense. And also the whole thing about being killed or dying, the Quran has this theme that in some verses it says that Jesus died, And then in one verse it says that they didn't kill him. So it looks like they're saying to people something like, okay, so we had the Messiah, and just the fact that he died, would you just go away? It was his mission. Basically, I think that's kind of the theme, as opposed to saying, look, the Messiah was not supposed to come and then just be with us for an eternity right there. He came, he had a mission to do. He will return. So the fact that he died or was killed shouldn't really affect you. It was still part of the plan. So that's kind of what I'm trying to understand from that. If I put Jesus into this verse, and I think it would make more sense than Muhammad in Mecca talking to a bunch of pagans.
Yeah, excellent, exactly. And it's like who runs away from the Momo of the standard narrative. Like that just doesn't make any sense. But yeah, so it's really interesting. The language parallels and almost eerily parallels that of so that the yellow parallels that of Matthew 23. And then you're right. So if he died or was killed, you inverted over your heels, and then it goes, whoever inverts over his two heels, then he will never harm Allah. So wait, what does that have to do with? That's a weird thing to say. Harm Allah a thing. That's so odd.
I think this is probably reading way too much into it. But when Jesus was crucified, and then the apostles, well, they are confused because they have no idea about the resurrection. For us, it's very basic because we've heard the story so many times that we think, how is it possible that they didn't join the dots and they knew that he was going to come back? But for them, from their POV, it is new. They don't know what to expect. And for the 3 days from crucifixion to resurrection, they're probably, the apostles, they're all losing faith. It's like, who are we following? Was he the Messiah, or was he maybe just a magician? Was he a trickster? What was he? So it's only after he appears to them that they go, oh wow, okay, fine, so now we know who he is. So I wonder if this is supposed to be taken in the context of the apostles during those 3 days when Jesus is no longer with them, and they are feeling like, okay, maybe we need to just give up all of this, go back to fishing because we were wrong. And then they're proving wrong immediately. I don't know.
Oh yeah, no, yeah, exactly. I think you exactly. So keep that thought. Keep that thought, and everyone in the chat and everyone who's watching this live, keep that thought, because I'm going to read you Matthew chapter 26, verse 30 to 56. So it is a long passage, but try to keep the words highlighted in purple, which is from so if he died, and then Allah will soon apportion the banking loans. So that the last half of 144. And remember, this is all relating to the most praised one. So I'll read out Matthew 26, verse 30 to 56. When they had sung a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. Then Jesus told them, "This very night you will all fall away on account of me, for it is written, I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will be scattered. But after I have risen, I will go ahead of you into Galilee." Peter replied, "Even if all fall away on account of you, I never will." "Truly, I tell you," Jesus answered, "this very night, before the rooster crows, you will disown me 3 times. But Peter declared, "Even if I have to die with you, I will never disown you." And all the other disciples said the same. Verse 36. Then Jesus went with his disciples to a place called Gethsemane, and he said to them, "Sit here while I go over there and pray." He took Peter and the 2 sons of Zebedee along with him, and he began to be sorrowful and troubled. Then he said to them, "My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me." Verse 39, going a little farther, he fell with his face to the ground and prayed, "My Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken away from me. Yet not as I will, but as you will." Then he returned to his disciples and found them sleeping. "Couldn't you men keep watch with me for 1 hour?" he asked Peter. "Watch and pray so that you will not fall into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak." Verse 42, he went away a second time and prayed, "My Father, if it is not possible for this cup to be taken away unless I drink it, may your will be done." Verse 43, when he came back, he again found them sleeping because their eyes were heavy. So he left them and went away once more and prayed the third time, saying the same thing. Then he returned to the disciples and said to them, "Are you still sleeping and resting? Look, the hour has come, and the Son of Man is delivered into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us go. Here comes my betrayer." Verse 47, while he was still speaking, Judas, one of the 12, arrived. With him was a large crowd armed with swords and clubs, sent from the chief priests and the elders of the people. Now the betrayer had arranged a signal with them. "The one I kiss is the man. Arrest him." Going at once to Jesus, Judas said, "Greetings, Rabbi," and kissed him. Jesus replied, "Do what you came for, friend." Then the men stepped forward, seized Jesus, and arrested him. With that, one of Jesus' companions reached for his sword, drew it out, and struck the servant of the high priest, cutting off his ear. "Put your sword back in its place," Jesus said to him, "for all who draw the sword will die by the sword. Do you think I cannot call on my Father, and he will at once put at my disposal more than 12 legions of angels? But how then would the scriptures be fulfilled that say it must happen in this way?" In that hour, Jesus said to the crowd, "Am I leading a rebellion that you have come out with swords and clubs to capture me? Every day I sat in the temple courts teaching, and you did not arrest me. But this has all taken place that the writings of the prophets might be fulfilled." Then all the disciples deserted him and fled. Wow, what do you think, hey?
Wow. Okay. Well, lots of thoughts. The first one is when Peter said, "No, no, no, I would even die with you." It's like, Peter, you should know, don't challenge he who can see the present, past, and future. Okay, so that was a bit of a silly move right there, but hey, that's fine. Now when you were reading this is very off topic, but I never actually understood this, I think, until now, the way that you actually read it, because Jesus says first about those who don't have a sword, go and buy one, sell your cloak and buy one. And then in this instance, the one case where it is the perfect time to actually draw swords, he says, "Don't do this. He who lives by the sword dies by the sword." But dies by the sword means something else. I've always read that as it means basically if you are actually a person of violence in the world, that's going to be your end. But no, the sword is probably about him because he's talking about death. So if you're going to be a man of violence, the sword that is Christ is the one that is going to cause you death, like final death. So that's I don't know. I've just actually joined that, making a lot more sense. And an interesting thing. So here, when it says, "And it was not for a self to die except by the orality of Allah." Now, I will say this like for the audience. I I still don't understand this word orality, and I discussed with John a while back, like, why is the Quran saying that Jesus performed all of these miracles by the orality of Allah? And I didn't quite understand it. Even now, I don't understand it. And John explained this very well to me. So maybe at one point, John, you could actually do a session just on that word, because of course it's very, very important. And I know that you discussed it with Saint Murat, and it still goes over my head. So that might actually be a good thing to discuss once on a very short show, maybe. But the point that I'm trying to make is we have in the Quran this expression used a lot when it comes to Jesus performing miracles by the orality of Allah. So if we have here this sentence that says, and it was not for ourselves in the past tense to die except for by the orality of Allah, when Jesus is performing miracles by the orality of Allah, and this comes immediately after the whole thing of Muhammad and the expression, if he died or was killed, I think when it says here self, I think that's Jesus. So it was not for Jesus to die except by the orality of Allah, basically his permission or his command. We need to look at the language, but I think this is probably not a general term. I think this is meant to be Jesus again. No?
It could, but I actually think that that is actually almost a quotation of Jesus' words. So I'm going to surprise everyone and say that there's actually more quotations from the gospel, and then I've got a little highlighted a termed writing. I actually think it's also paraphrasing Psalm 139. So it's quite rich in terms of there's a lot of biblical things hidden in these seemingly random sentences. But actually, when you have an eye for the biblical themes, thematic biblical passages, you can almost reconstruct a almost like a liturgy, or you could say it's like a devotional where you're supposed to start thinking about more Bible passages. Because, yeah, I would suggest that for this part, it's following the theme about faithfulness in the time of, and yes, it is actually specifically, because it's all related to this most praised one, Jesus the Messiah, then it's definitely, or it's like a historical recollection, because it talks about, inverting over your heels, and people, and it says everyone fled, as we saw. The Bible passage does not like mince words. It goes, what is it? Verse 56. Then all the disciples deserted him and fled. So that's not very flattering, is it?
No, that was, I learned the other day that the word used there in the Bible is very often translated as scattered, and is the same word that the Bible uses when, I think it's in the verse that you read before, that if the shepherd is struck, then the flock scatters. So they use exactly the same word in this context when the apostles scattered after the shepherd is struck. So that was actually a very, very cool find.
It is. Oh, before we move on, can I would also I'll also read Mark 14, 43 to 52, because it gives a very different angle. And once you hear this, then you're going to really see about what it means by inverting over their two heels in this particular passage in purple. So you're going to love it. All right. So Mark 14, 43 to 52. And so you'll hear this again. Just as he was speaking, Judas, one of the 12, appeared. With him was a crowd armed with swords and clubs, sent from the chief priests, the teachers of the law, and the elders. Now the betrayer had arranged a signal with them. The one I kiss is the man. Arrest him and lead him away under guard. Going at once to Jesus, Judas said, Rabbi, and kissed him. The men seized Jesus and arrested him. Then one of those standing near drew his sword and struck the servant of the high priest, cutting off his ear. Am I leading a rebellion, Jesus said, that you have come out with swords and clubs to capture me? Every day I was with you, teaching in the temple courts, and you did not arrest me, but the scriptures must be fulfilled. Then everyone deserted him and fled. Now pay attention to verse 51 and 52. A young man wearing nothing but a linen garment was following Jesus. When they seized him, he fled naked, leaving his garment behind. Now do you see?
Okay.
See?
Wow.
That sounds like inverting, doesn't it? Inverting over his two heels.
Yeah, I don't understand the thing about the young man wearing something like this and then leaving that behind. I suppose that has a lot of deeper meaning. But yeah, it does sound very much about the whole inverting over your heels. That's actually just what happens when he is arrested and so on. First with Peter, and now in these verses, basically everybody scatters. It actually sounds exactly what you would expect, the word inverting as in going in the other direction. So yeah, great theme.
Yeah, exactly. And so I know it's a long passage, but it really gives context that is missing because it's so short. It's like one sentence and it's very vague. But then when you bring the biblical passage that is very obviously talking about Jesus, then hang on, Muhammad has to be no one else but Jesus, and specifically in the Passion Week, because this is as he goes to the cross towards his death or fulfillment of the scriptures, and his resurrection, again, the greater fulfillment of the scriptures. And you've heard in both passages, Jesus says, this is so the scriptures may be fulfilled. And so maybe that's where it goes, he will never harm God a thing, because this is all going to God's promises and plans.
Right. So that's actually what you see on when it says a termed writing about the fulfillment of the scriptures. Okay, that's clever.
Yeah, it is. And so let me show you, because I promised you, I said, you're not going to see that bit where it says, and it was not for herself to die except by the orality of Allah, the termed writing. Okay, let me read to you the words of Jesus in Matthew chapter 10, verse 29 to 39. So we've already got quite a lot of, just for the audience and everyone who's listening, you can really see a lot of the canonical gospels in a surprising place, in a supposedly passage about Muhammad. It's actually all about the biblical gospels. So Matthew chapter 10, verse 20, what I said, 29 to 39, and the context of this passage. So Matthew 10 is that Jesus is sending his disciples to preach the gospel two by two. So 29, and they're going to the children of Israel, and so the disciples are going to the towns to tell them that Jesus is preaching, doing his ministry. So chapter 10, verse 29 to 39. Are not two sparrows sold for a penny? Yet not one of them will fall to the ground outside of your Father's care. And even the very hairs of your head are all numbered. So don't be afraid. You are worth more than many sparrows. Whoever acknowledges me before others, I will also acknowledge before my Father in heaven. But whoever disowns me before others, I will disown before my Father in heaven. Do not suppose that I have come to bring peace to the earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I have come to turn a man against his father, a daughter against her mother, a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. A man's enemies will be the members of his own household. Anyone who loves their father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. Anyone who loves their son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. Whoever does not take up their cross and follow me is not worthy of me. Whoever finds their life will lose it, and whoever loses their life for my sake will find it. There you go. You know what? I'll just read 40 to. I'll just finish the chapter. Anyone who welcomes you welcomes me, and anyone who welcomes me welcomes the one who sent me. Whoever welcomes a prophet as a prophet will receive a prophet's reward, and whoever welcomes a righteous person as a righteous person will receive a righteous person's reward. And if anyone gives even a cup of cold water to one of these little ones who is my disciple, truly I tell you, that person will certainly not lose their reward. So you can sort of see, like, the interesting thing about the sparrow, where it goes, that a sparrow will not fall to the ground, like die, outside of your father's care. So, I mean, I just thought that language was very striking, given what we've already seen in the last verse about that's packed with verses from the gospel. I thought this one probably fits the best. Yeah. And it sort of the theme sort of flows with each of these biblical passages. Any thoughts on that? I mean, there's a lot in Matthew's in Jesus' words in Matthew 10, but
Yes, and with the whole theme of inverting, everything that you're reading is like it is right there. Jesus saying first, basically, don't invert, like stick the course, and also the theme of the apostles, particularly just scattering when things go south. On the last section that you read, one thing I noticed when I spoke with Lloyd and Odon about a particular verse. I will just read it real quick, yes, because I think it adds a little bit to what you are saying as well from the Quran, of course. So Surah 58, verse 22, it says, I will not read the whole thing, but it says, you will not find a people who believe in Allah and the last day having affection for those who oppose Allah and his messenger. Now that is interpreted as Muhammad, but it's not Muhammad, it's Jesus. It continues with, even if they were their fathers or their sons or their mothers or their kindred, those he has decreed within their hearts faith and supported them with a spirit from him. So when you read this, Jesus saying, I didn't come to bring peace but a sword. And there is this theme as well in other places in the Quran, which is, this is going to get messy because turning a son against the father and a daughter against the mother. And we have something quite similar as well right there in the Quran, saying basically as well the same theme. Like everyone is going to turn against everyone. It's going to be a bit of a split. So yeah, I thought I'd mention that one.
Oh yes. Yeah, and the important thing to remember is Jesus is speaking in a Middle Eastern context. So family was everything. So if your house is divided, that was bad. So that was very bad. It's like, so it basically means you could be kicked out of your own home, and you could even get ostracized by your own society, your community, because of faith in Jesus as Messiah. And so that's exactly what was going on in Jerusalem in the first couple centuries of our church history. Was basically you had people getting kicked out of a synagogue for believing that Jesus was the Messiah, and you're basically a stranger to the community. No one wanted to do business with you. No one wanted to do trade. If the ruling synagogue leader just said, "No, we don't want this person because he believes in Jesus." That was a big deal. So what Jesus is warning is like if becoming a disciple is not going to be and joining the kingdom of God is not going to be a bed of roses, because the expectation was, the kingdom of God was going to come with power. There's going to be, it's going to be paradise. Jesus is warning you that, warning his listeners that there's going to be persecution from within your own, from the people who are closest to you, and so count the cost of discipleship. You'll have to take up your cross if you're going to follow me, and it's a very big deal. And I guess the Quran is trying to do a abbreviation of it because it assumes that you know these passages. So yeah, and so it's a
Yes.
yeah, and it's sadly it's true of today, isn't it? That in the Middle East, yeah, for those who turn to Jesus, it is a very hard life, and so we. Mm,
Yes, and that's actually nowadays when it really, well, we tend to actually see our mentality now, and then we push it back through history when it was not the case. But you're absolutely right. Even to this day, those things happen a lot, particularly with Muslims. They accept Christ and they still have to pretend to be Muslims. Otherwise, they just lose absolutely everything in their lives, maybe their lives. So even we see that. And if we roll this back to the pre-crucifixion, I think, well, you certainly know more about this than me. I think at that point, probably the apostles still think that Jesus is claiming to be the Messiah, that is the Jewish Messiah. They have at that point no thoughts of, okay, this is going to be for the worlds, it's going to be for the Gentiles. They're probably still thinking, he is the Messiah for the Jews. We're going to be preaching to the Jews, and that's all. And when that happens, well, people will see them as just a handful of guys being blasphemous, saying things that really contradict the scriptures. They would not be seen and welcomed with open arms. Quite the opposite. They will be splitting houses. If somebody says, yes, I believe that the Messiah has come and now we understand the scriptures better and we were wrong about quite a few things, that would split houses immediately, just like people would try to stone Jesus for saying things that they would see as blasphemous. The same things would happen in every household. Somebody accepts Jesus, okay, now you're a blasphemer and a heretic, pretty much. So if we think about what they were experiencing, it all makes a lot of sense. The whole split, of course, would happen now. We see it differently. It's like, okay, but now we have the internet and people can learn and you can explain things to your family. That was not the case 2000 years ago. You probably lose everything. And like you said, John, we still see that to this day, more often than not in Muslim families. So yeah, quite something.
that's it. So got to keep praying for for our brothers that are, I guess, living in secret and I guess hiding. But that God will continue to sustain them. Yeah. Well, it's interesting because when it talks about it was not for self to die, and that word self is actually the Arabic word nafs, nafs. So that's basically what usually gets translated as soul. But Murad has consistently translated as self, um, to keep it straightforward. So every time you see the word self, that's the Arabic word nafs, or as it's very similar to the Hebrew nefesh, nefesh or nefs. So it was not for a soul to die except by the morality of Allah. And I actually think it's there is a hint of a paraphrase of Psalm 139, because it talks about a termed writing, and it says like, so I'll read out just one verse, which is Psalm 139, verse 16. Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. So if you combine that, it's like, and I guess combining what Jesus said in Matthew chapter 10, it really adds it adds a lot when you take Psalm 139 um, and then what Jesus says about the Father who cares for the sparrow but cares more for you. Um, and so it's interesting.
Yeah, that's very cool. I think we can actually see the theme very clearly in there. And then I see that you have highlighted as well here, like this whole thing about combated. So combated
Yeah,
with him.
yeah, and it's interesting. So, so my theory, right, is that when it talks about of a prophet, okay, it's very easy to think these days of, and especially as Christians, we think, okay, prophet meaning like, you know, Isaiah, and for example, Daniel, Ezekiel. So we think of prophets who write biblical scriptures. But I actually think that depending on the context, and a lot of times when it says, and as well as a prophet, that actually could very well mean a Christian preacher or an evangelist. And so my theory is that when we read that, when we see, okay, this verse where it goes, and of whereas of a prophet, blah blah blah, that could often mean a Christian evangelist who gets sent to spread the gospel and the kingdom of God, or even a Christian preacher. And the reason why is the biblical justification I bring to that is in the New Testament, in the book of Acts, there are prophets within the church that don't write scripture, but they have a prominent role in speaking and preaching. And so, therefore, when it says like 146, when the Apostle Paul goes preaching and going to do mission work in, say, Acts 17 or places where the gospel hasn't been heard, so then there is conflict and then there's persecution. So that's why the theme about inverting in the gospels that we've highlighted in purple then gets continued on. So it starts with Jesus, the praised one, talks about the Passion Week, and it talks about being faithful in the times of persecution, and it highlights that God was still faithful even when the disciples, the apostles, were about to run away, and they were with Jesus physically. But then now, as Christian preachers continue to preach the same gospel, they did not become weak when someone has targeted them in the way of Allah, which means, okay, so we said the way of Allah is like the way of the Christian faith. You know, Jesus is the way. You know, so yeah, so many Christian preachers were striving for the kingdom of God, and they did not become weak or succumb themselves. And then it continues. Allah loves the enduring ones, and their saying was not except that they have said, "Our Lord, forgive for us our guilts." So again, this is all saying that these Christian preachers need that forgiveness themselves, and they continue to be enduring, following the example of the most praised one, and succeeding the apostles.
Okay, yeah, I'm absolutely with
Yeah.
you on that one.
Yeah, so it's pretty cool. And then the last part I've highlighted is, so the reason why I haven't I left some things in white was because that's for the next episode where we're going to unpack that, because it talks about, just so we don't detract or just simply say in a statement, it's very problematic because if what we have already said in this whole hour of this episode is not problematic for Islam in and of itself, then what I haven't highlighted is even more problematic, because it keeps saying Allah will apportion the thanking ones, and then it goes, we will advance. So again, because it carries on, okay, it goes, okay, look, Allah will soon apportion the thanking ones in verse 144. 145, it goes, whoever wills the requital of a one close by, we will advance him from it. And then it carries on, and then 146, 148, the one that's not highlighted, Allah advance them the requital of the one close by. So wait, is it we or is it Allah? Did you see where I'm going with that? But that's gonna see that's a big problem for Islam, because it uses the exact same phrase and sentence about Allah doing something, and then we will do this, we will do this, Allah does this, we do this. It's not, it's pretty problematic on a plain reading. So that just adds more, ammunition against the silly Islamic nonsense. Clearly, Allah is not a monad, a Unitarian monad, just by using the words of the Quran itself.
Yes, the fact that normally it will appear as we, plural, that should be a very heavy hint. I've heard quite recently that this interpretation that the we is kind of like a royal we, that Allah is speaking in the third person or in the plural first person, because it makes him like, it's kind of like an air of grandeur. Like we use actually this sort of language nowadays, but the royal we in the Quran, it didn't exist in the 7th century. It is later when they say, no, that is like a royal we, but it is not attested as something that they used to say. Back then, if it said we, it meant we. It was plural. So they of course have to say, no, that doesn't mean Trinity. Is just a nice way for Allah to speak about himself. When I think after everything that you have shown here on the channel is, no, when it says we, it actually means we. And this was very, very Trinitarian. So there.
Absolutely, yeah. Because we see it's the exact same word for word in verse 144 and 145. Like it goes, Allah will soon apportion the thanking ones. And then take a look at the last part of 145. We will soon apportion the thanking ones. And even that word apportion is very surprising as well. But just to wrap up on what we want to focus on in this this theme is because I'll actually like really go full, like blow everything apart with with the Arabic about what the word apportion means and how that again is very problematic for modern Islam. So and that will be in the next main episode. But I really want to take us to 149, and it's quite interesting. The one I've highlighted at the bottom, the last passage, the last portion of the passage we're looking at, because it goes, "O you who believe, if you obey those who have covered, they will rebound you over your heels, then invert yourselves into losers." Now, so this is really going to, I guess, how do I say, it's going to really pack everything together. Right? It's going to bring everything together from what we've looked at from the previous Muhammad passages, because the particular one was when it talks about the Jerusalem temple, and we looked at chapter 47, where it talks about the conflict between those who believe and those who have covered. So we've looked at that before, and how there's the tension, and we've always said it's it's basically recapping the story in the book of Acts, where the Apostle Paul goes to the Jewish people and goes to the Jewish synagogues to preach that Jesus is the Messiah, and he keeps getting basically thrown out, and it's enraging the coverers. It's like, get rid of. You read the book of Acts, is like the way people respond to the Apostle Paul. They're like, get rid of him, rid the earth of him. Yeah. And so you can really sense this is not a neutral, you believe Jesus is the Messiah? Oh, that's good enough for you. That's very nice. No. This is, if you believe Jesus is the Messiah, we want to kick everyone out of, you have no place in the Jerusalem temple. There's you get kicked out of the synagogue, you get ostracized, all this sorts of stuff. So that is the true context of verse 149. So if you obey those who believe in Jesus the Messiah, the most praised one, the resurrected Messiah who fulfills the scriptures. If you obey those who disbelieve and reject that, they will try to get you to renounce your faith. And I want to read to you a passage from the book of Hebrews, which the whole book of Hebrews is, I think, written in that very context about, because it speaks about how the Jerusalem temple is made obsolete because that old covenant is redundant because Jesus is the greater fulfillment. Jesus is the greater Moses. He is the Messiah. He is the Son of God, and he is the completion for all who believe and have faith in God. But there is a particular passage that I want to read that really does speak into that verse I've highlighted. And yeah, once you hear it, it's going to be very hard to think. You'll just see that there's no room for the silly Islamic nonsense and any of these tafsirs. So what was I wanting to say was what is it? Okay, so Hebrews 10 verse 38, or let's just say, let's go from like verse 33. Okay, or actually verse 32. Remember those earlier days. So Hebrews chapter 10, 32 to 39. Remember those earlier days after you had received the light, when you endured in a great conflict full of suffering. Sometimes you were publicly exposed to insult and persecution. At other times you stood side by side with those who were so treated. You suffered along with those in prison and joyfully accepted the confiscation of your property, because you knew that you yourselves had better and lasting possessions. So do not throw away your confidence. It will be richly rewarded. You need to persevere so that when you have done the will of God, you will receive what he has promised. For in just a little while, he who is coming will come and will not delay. But my righteous one will live by faith, and I take no pleasure in the one who shrinks back. Verse 39, but we do not belong to those who shrink back and are destroyed, but to those who have faith and are saved. So yeah, what are your thoughts on that so far?
Well, my first thought is, I think there is a verse in the Quran that actually says something very, very similar to what you have just read. So let's actually catch up after the show and let's see if I can find it. I think there is one that actually just says almost verbatim what you have just read. But on this one here, so on 149, if we unpack that one backwards, so it's talking, let's say, if you change, if you invert, you become of the losers. Okay, so that means that you are currently of the winners. And it's saying if those who deny, if you obey those who deny, then you will basically invert and be of the losers. So I think the implication is you are of the winners because you who believed, so you believed in the Messiah, you're of the winners. But if you obey those who deny, who covered, then you will be of the losers. So it would make perfect sense to say, okay, so you have accepted the Messiah, but if you speak with those, in the context would be Jews who say, no, he didn't happen. It was not true. The whole thing is false. We're still waiting for the Messiah to come and to, destroy the Roman Empire or whatever, which then that becomes Islam. The ones that now are trying to actually find Christians, as you know, the Dawa huts in the UK and places like that, where they will actually find Christians who know very little about the religion and says, but the Trinity makes no sense. Father, Son, Holy Spirit, you have three gods, and Islam is so easy with one God. That's it. And they will say these sort of things. They will make Christians, whenever they have the opportunity, to deny, basically they cover, they deny the Messiah, and then they become of the losers. It's kind of interesting that the book is actually saying something that then or condemning something, and that's exactly what Islam then became, to deny Jesus, and that's just what has happened. It's very interesting, not to use a word like satanic or anything of the sort. Of course, I wouldn't. But yeah, that's very interesting. So this is actually assuming that is saying, if Jesus died or was killed, will you actually just be turning away? And the answer, of course, should be of people, no, it was part of the mission. And then it says, if you obey those who still deny, then you will be of the losers. Basically, all of this is reinforcing you need to believe it did happen and Jesus is the Messiah, but people are going to try to turn you away from the Messiah. So very
That's
interesting.
it. Yeah, it is. So and yeah, so the irony about what modern Islam represents today and how it contradicts this very passage of the Quran, their own book that they so claim, is not lost on us. Like, yeah, the irony is not lost on us. And yeah, it's very clear that it's or you who have believed in Jesus, the resurrected Messiah, who is the fulfillment of the scriptures. Absolutely, that is the straight path, and yeah, and and that is the only way that your guilts are forgiven, and excessiveness, excessiveness. So there you go, and but yeah, and it's so it still is following the biblical passage. So, but you know what? So for everyone who's who's been following our series, yeah, this is really gonna. The next episode is really gonna equip you. So if someone does, in speakers corner, try to accost you and talk at you, thanks to Saint Murad, we're going to be on the uppermost winning side, and they'll be running away from us. Because we've got the answers, we've got what makes sense, and they've only just got what is it, fabrications upon fabrications, and and it was very fitting what Odon said about like how the narrative has to keep getting like patchwork and just keeps getting more complicated because it's like it's reverse engineered, so it keeps going. It's a nasty cycle where they make the latest update to their narrative. They find holes and then they have to go back again and then and edit the holes out. But then that just makes more holes the more they edit. So it's like quicksand. The more they struggle, the faster they start sinking. But God willing, the truth prevails, and the more the coverers get enraged, or the more the light of Jesus shines. So
And not to go into like the plot holes that are created through all of this, but it happens even nowadays when we see movies that were created, say, a while back, and then they say, okay, we have the IP, let's actually create more movies based on that original IP. Very often they just break the whole canon because you have to create a new story, and that creates plot holes. And if you take them back to the originals, everything starts to break. So you have to really just stop thinking about it because everything breaks. And now, like you said, we have these great warriors such as Sen Murad, who can actually give us this information which we couldn't actually know otherwise. So we know from people like Usama, who says the even Kathir, he's making things up. He has no way of knowing those things. He has to consult with the uh, Jewish scriptures and Christian scriptures, and then he keeps making things up, and their accounts keep getting bigger and bigger. The Christian Prince says the same thing. Is most of Ibn Kathir in English, you cannot read it because it hasn't been translated, but it is massive. Murad says Ibn Kathir keeps growing. Over the centuries, there is more and more stuff being created, and then he's saying, oh no, yeah, that was Ibn Kathir, when that's not the case. And the other day I heard Al-Fadi mention very quickly, because I think it's part of his PhD, saying that in the very early hadiths, nothing was narrated from Muhammad, and it is much later when the hadiths start to say and Muhammad said this, Muhammad said that, which that will be obviously a game changer if he has actually figured out things like that, and he can prove that even the hadith narrations initially have nothing to do with Muhammad and then they get updated or something like that. That would be great. But we do know that the book tells one story and then they create stories to justify that. They create plot holes, then more stories, more plot holes, and it keeps going round in circles. So it is absolutely wonderful to just go back to, say, to square one, looking at text and saying, what does it mean? And the work that you are doing, John, is phenomenal. The book makes obviously no sense, as we've been told so many times. It makes Lloyd's head, heart, and mine, and everybody else's. So by you looking at the actual text and saying, okay, these people were in a Judeo-Christian theme. Let's see how they would have interpreted these verses because they were familiar with the Bible. It actually brings clarity and peace on something that a little while ago was just an absolute mess, and there was no way of understanding it. And now I think one step at a time, we're starting to understand it. So thank you very much for all of this. Keep up the good work, and I really want to see more and more of your work because this is phenomenal. I think you are onto something here, and the Quran has to be interpreted through the lens of the Bible. Certainly so.
Yeah. Oh, thanks for yeah. I'm honored to be able to yeah to serve everyone, and you know, and this is for everyone to use, whether, because I'm a confessional Christian, so absolutely, you know, I stand by it. But you know, even for someone like, I think because Kalam L was watching this, and it's like anyone can use this, whether they're, you know, whatever their belief is, because you're just taking text for text and putting it together and saying, well, look, there's just no no Islam here at all. It's like when it's like when we get that error 404, like cannot be found. It's like that's, yep. So error 404, and then guess who couldn't be found? But now I'm back, so can't get rid of me that easy. um, you know what? I just realized that there's one thing that I hadn't prepared for, but I'd actually just discovered it. I can actually explain what whoever wills the requital of the one close by, and then requital of the last one. So that whole business is basically explained by Matthew chapter 6, verse 1. So I'll just read that. Be careful not to practice your righteousness in front of others to be seen by them, because if you do, you will have no reward from your Father in heaven. And so basically, it talks about you know, your reward, like in the present and from your heavenly reward. So you can actually just see how all that is in Matthew 6. So I'll just read a little bit more of that. So when you give to the needy, do not announce it with trumpets, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and on the streets, to be honored by others. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward in full. But when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret. Then your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. And when you pray, do not be like the hypocrites, for they love to pray standing in the synagogues and on the street corners to be seen by others. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward in full. But when you go pray, when you pray, go into your room, close the door, and pray to your Father who is unseen. Then your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. Okay, so you basically get that theme about rewards. So there's, you know, whoever requils the requital of the one close by, and then so it's a very clever way of just like a summary statement of this passage in Matthew 6 about you know, warning, Jesus warning his disciples, you know, if you do something to be praised by, publicly to be praised, then that's your own reward. That's it. But when you do something in secret for the glory of God, then God will reward you. And so yeah, that's how I would read the whole thing about apportioning the fainting ones. Yeah, how's that for a little bonus? See, you
Oh
have the whole
wow!
passage explained to you from the Bible. Praise God.
Wow! So actually, thank you, John. I think you have finally made the penny drop for me on this, because I think the translations normally, when they say the reward of the one close by, as per Murad here, they translate that as the reward in this world, and then compared to the reward in the hereafter. But what you're
Yeah,
saying is, if you seek the reward from others, from one, say a person close by doing things that show how pious you are and how generous you are, is like, no, all that you want is the attention from that person to say, oh my goodness me, you're so good, look at about how much charity you give. So it is not about the reward. Well, it is the reward in this life, but it is about you seeking the approval of other people, seeing you as something great. And this is saying, well, if that's what you want, you are going to do things in public, and you're going to get that approval from the one near you, from people, and so on. So I think you have just reframed that expression, and I'm so going to look at all of the places where Murad translates it in this way. That's very powerful insight. Thank you, John.
oh, praise be to God. That's good. Yeah, and so we've basically, yeah, really getting close to putting the nail in the coffin of the Islamic narrative. So there we have it. So that's this whole passage tafsired for you, and for the audience, through using the Injil, because we really just used the Gospel of Matthew, and a bit of Mark and Hebrews, to really reframe, how do I say it, frame the whole this whole passage. And as you can see, it's very rich in in meaning, and actually very edifying. So I'm glad everyone's enjoying this. And so yeah, basically, what I'll say is, so the next episode will be on exactly on the Trinity. So we're really going to unpack once and for Quranic theology about the Trinity, because it really does not say what people want it, what certain coverers want you to believe. So that's just how I'll frame it, and we're really gonna go to town with that episode on Quranic theology and on the Trinity, because yeah, it really is. One thing I'll probably say, and I'll be famous for saying this, is that going by what the Arabic Quran says, with what Murad has translated for us, Trinitarian Christianity is acceptable in the Quran. And God willing, when we find the Aramaic, I guess a translation of the Quran from Aramaic, we'll actually see that Trinitarian Christianity is adored. So with the Arabic understanding, it's acceptable, but with the Aramaic, it's adored. It's adored and praised. So yeah, but working with what we got, we'll see that the true believers are Trinitarian Trinitarian Christians. And then of course, there's always going to be a bonus episode. We're going to finally uncover what exactly this group that keeps showing up, which is the kuffar, those who cover, those who've covered, and also the mushrik, or the those who part. It talks about the partnering ones or associators. And spoiler alert, it's very biblical. It also is not what you think it is. Yeah, shock horror. Yeah.
Wow.
Well, yeah, shock to us and horror to some other people. But yes, and we're also going to have a lot of fun with that. So, yeah. So we're gonna figure it. I'm gonna call it the dark triad, because it's basically the kuffar, the mushrik, and those who disbelieve, or the darkeners, because it actually does say the darkeners, or those who darken. So I'm going to make a bit of a pun and say it's a dark triad.
Right. So you are going to say that the Quran doesn't deny the Trinity?
No, it doesn't.
Wow.
It actually, yeah. And so it's gonna be fun. It's gonna be loaded with some other fun stuff, and you're gonna at least see a lot of interesting things about this Allah character in the Quran as well. So we're even going to see that basically the Quranic Allah is not the Allah of the standard Islamic religion, because and again, kudos to our brother Saint Murad, because we could not do this without his work. Even the analysis that I'm doing is not going to be possible with any other translation, because only the Murad translation is consistent, that you can actually find and uncover, no pun intended, the true themes that run through the chapters. So that's the exciting stuff coming up next, and yes, we are actually getting closer to the end of my series, and so that's why as I said, we're really going to go full scorched earth policy. Like, there's going to be no going back, as you've probably already seen in this recording. There really is no going back. And so before I let you go, as I said, brother Saint Murad is we couldn't have done this without you, and we're going to have so much more fun using your work. And Speaker's Corner. So you know, we talk about all those people who stop you, and like those friendly Dawagandists, those Muslim evangelists that want to talk to you about Islam and say it's very simple, and all this stuff. But because we're doing this theme about who the true Muhammad is in the Quran. The Quranic Muhammad is not the Muhammad of the standard Islamic narrative, and the Quranic Allah is not the Allah of the standard Islamic narrative. So I remember that once and for all, we've finally hit it. Okay, the most intensely praised one is Jesus, the Messiah, who's been resurrected and is the fulfillment of the scriptures. And the reason why I bring up Dr. J. Smith is because he was there was someone who said well, if you say that Muhammad didn't exist, you get laughed at. Well, that's not. Well, I don't think that's true, because with Dr. J's work about the historical critique, using the historical critique, we've basically found out that in Speaker's Corner in the UK, these Muslim speakers, they won't talk to you if you start bringing up J. Smith's arguments, and he was the one that got them to run away and got them on the back foot, because of the what do you call it, all the variant Qurans. There's 26 different Arabic Qurans, and that number keeps going up. So we've got to give credit and credit to who it's due. So credit to and kudos to Saint Murad and Dr. J. Smith, because we're now the tides have changed, and it's our turn to be on the so-called offensive, or it's our time to speak. So it's exciting times ahead.
I totally agree with that, and I do think that particularly when it comes to individual Muslims, it really depends on the person. Some of them, they will be very responsive to the traditional apologist approach, which is, look at these hadiths, your imam is not showing you these hadiths for a reason, or showing contradictions within the Quran, or showing problems with the Arabic, or. So everybody's different at what thing will make them just see what Islam really is. And the method that has been now popularized by J. Smith, which is, let's go back to the sources. We don't actually have the early records, as Muslims believe or would believe that they had, and also everything that we have seems to actually contradict the Islam they understand now. So to some people that will work, to some others it won't. They will think, no, hang on a minute, if you don't have any sources, that means whatever is, they haven't been found, but they will, and then they move on. And to those people, maybe the hadith approach will work. So everybody's actually different, but I think for us, particularly what we're trying to do in this channel, which is everybody to their own beliefs, and we know exactly where we tick, but in terms of Islam, we see the problems, and we are doing this exploration to get to the bottom of the truth. With having our Muslim brothers and sisters in mind, we see all of this dawah that is going on from their book all the way to their traditions and to every single action that they do because commanded by Islam. We see the lies in there, and that's what they need to know. And then they need to make their way to the truth, as opposed to just being stuck in a position where they actually cannot live, they lose everything in their lives. So I think the approach from Dr. J. Smith and Mel and Odon is great. Whether to use it in an apologetics realm, that will be up to the person. And here, of course, we are not doing the apologist's work. We are simply digging. That's all we do. We're trying to get to the bottom of the truth and to help the community understand things better. And with that in mind, John, you're doing a phenomenal job. And I don't think that many people have thought about trying to understand the Quran through the Bible. So that's is probably going to be a very important piece of or tool in order to really make sense of the whole thing. So keep up the good work.
Thank you. Thank you. And all for the glory of Jesus, the most intensely praised one. Actually, before we move on to the well, pretty much the last slide, but I've got to say, I remember having a conversation with Saint Murad, and he said, I'll never forget that he said this. He said that there's a video that of Dr. J. Smith having a debate in Speaker's Corner like 5 years ago, or and he was saying that, and you can actually you can find it. He was like saying that like when J. Smith was speaking, he was speaking with debating none other than Muhammad Hijab, the Muhammad Hijab. Back then he was quite a big deal. And so anyway, they're having a debate in Speaker's Corner, and he was like, Jay Smith was actually making such good points that Muhammad Hijab, the only thing he could do was just go distract the audience by showing off his fatty muscles. So that's Murad's exact words, is like basically the great Muhammad Hijab had nothing to answer Dr. J. Smith's arguments. That all he had to do was like just pose and try to flex, and yeah, it just wasn't a good look, and that was all caught on camera. So yeah, so I just thought I would add that, because it's that's something else.
That was years ago. So since then, lots of things have happened, and I think Jay Smith is now trying to put all of his findings in one book, which I think is probably well overdue. So we're all looking forward to that. And but lots of things are still happening. Lots of people are finding things. It is only recently that we're finding churches buried in the Middle East, which means the whole story of how Islam began is just not true. You didn't have all of this thing about just pagans, and there was no Christianity. It's like, no, there was Christianity. They were familiar with all of this. And just on this thing that you wrote here, so I had never actually considered that until you actually mentioned this a little while ago, which is, could then the title Muhammad or Mahmad be not just about Jesus, but about Jesus post-resurrection? And it just makes so much sense. I really need to investigate all of those verses now in more detail, but it would certainly explain why the Quran keeps just talking about Jesus all the time by name, or the Messiah, or the Son of Mary, and then only in 4 places it would then use Mahmad or Muhammad. It would be okay. So if he's the Messiah, but then once he has gone through the sacrifice, then he returns and he is the most intensely praised. It actually makes so much sense. So maybe this will be a big piece of the jigsaw as well. And when we put the verses in order, we can see the progression from Jesus pre-crucifixion, and then verses that would mention Jesus post-crucifixion, and at the moment we can't see it because it's all over the place. So I think that is a very powerful insight. I need to investigate those, but I really hope that you are absolutely correct on that one.
Yeah, yeah, and I think from at least we've got biblical backing for it. And I'll sort of drop a speculation. So you have basically 4 vowels, so meme, ha, meme, bow. So what I'll propose is that is also a very similar to the tetragrammaton, where you have God's name. It's 4 vowels, Y, like YH, WH, or VH. So you've basically got a 4 consonants as the name of God, and then the Mahmud is also the same thing but applies to the Messiah. So you've got a messianic tetragrammaton in the same way you've got like Yahweh, or I say Jehovah, but you've got the 4. You've got like this very special reflection where it's like you've got the holy sacred name of God, and then you've got like a special sacred title for the Messiah. It would make a lot of sense. And so so there's like a very special thing going on with these 4 vowels. Yeah. And I think that it will actually add a lot of insight to chapter 61, which again is all about Jesus. But so the last, I guess the last slide. I know we joke about homework, but it's quite funny because it will keep this on for people to be able to screenshot it. But it turns out that this last one, it has all the verses we've done in order. So at the top in the bright green box, we've got chapter 48, and it's the full context. So I always recommend read from verse 18 to 29, the full context, and then you see those biblical passages are whole chapters. So they all contribute to understanding what is the full context of the Quranic passage in question. So the top one is the first Muhammad passage we did, chapter 48. Chapter 47 is basically what we did afterwards, which is covering that theme about the believers and those who reject or cover the resurrected Messiah Jesus. And and it was said before, there's a cheeky nod to the events surrounding Jerusalem in 70 AD, which is what I think verse 4 was all about. And we could tell that there was a stark contrast between the believers in that chapter 47 passage, because it was like, those who covered, Allah made their works and then those who believe are the ones who prosper and are successful, and they enter the garden. And so you've got this, you got that theme about, which I keep saying always goes back to chapter 3:55, that those who believe in and follow Jesus, who has fulfilled the scriptures in his resurrection, his death and his resurrection and atonement, they are the ones who are uppermost, and they enter the garden and enter the kingdom. And then, chapter 33, 31 to 50 is a full passage where, forgiveness is not mentioned explicitly, but it's assumed and applied. And I think it's very obvious because it talks about, their greeting is peace. And then we see in John chapter 20 and Luke 24, when Jesus, after he's risen on the 3rd day, he sees his disciples who are, hiding in fear. And Jesus says to them, peace be upon you. So how can that not be, talking about the resurrected Jesus right there? So, 33, which is chapter 33, which has a lot of, like really iffy stuff from the Arabic. But then surprisingly, this passage about Muhammad is very biblical. So that's why I suggest we could like, move it somewhere else. And a special note, it says Allah prays over the believers in that. So I think it's chapter 33, verse 43. It was where it says, he it is who prays over you and the angels to bring you from darkness into the light. Yeah. But then, of course, the famous verse where it says, surely Allah and his angels pray over the prophet, that's in verse 60 or 63 of the same chapter 33. And this last one that we've just been covering in this episode, chapter 3, verse 133 to 152. So you can see we've gone in descending order. We go 48 all the way down to chapter 3. We're going to need to add more to that. So Matthew chapter 23 was the one that I read out, and Matthew chapter 6, and I guess Hebrews 11, or no, Hebrews chapter 10. So see, there's a really how do I say it? It's really a banquet, a feast of of biblical hidden treasures that are hidden in the Quranic text. And as I said before in the first episode we did on our series, the Quran basically expects you to know the Bible. It expects you to really know it inside and out, so that you can actually see the hidden stuff in there. And so here's what I want to really emphasize to the viewers, because it is hard to I guess picture that, because we've been lied to for so long about how there's the Quran. We're always told the Quran contradicts the Bible. It's like, well, the thing is that's easy to make that. I can see how that conclusion can come to, because one, we've had really bad translations. In fact, they're just not translations at all. But what we actually need to do is we need to stop thinking word for word. So we should stop trying to look for direct quotations, because there are precious few, and I'm not just saying this sentimentally, but there are precious few quotations that are actually direct quotes from the Bible. There's actually there's a few in the Quranic text. We've got to start thinking idea for idea, thought for thought, and theme for theme, like thematically. So if we sort of zoom out and think thematically of the Bible, you'll actually find that it's packed. And you'll find, you can already see from this list that you've probably screenshotted, and it's actually like from Genesis to Revelation. We've got a lot of different passages. I mean, we keep encountering the Book of Acts, but we've got the Psalms, ideas from the Proverbs, with contrasts, believers and disbelievers, as a way of saying like fools and the wise men. You got Isaiah, you got the writings of Paul, you've got the Gospel according to John, Luke, and Matthew. So you've basically got all four Gospels, and some even say that the Book of Acts is like the second half of the Book of Luke. So Luke and Acts are actually are meant to be one book. So there you go. And you've got the theology of Hebrews, where there's a lot of strong themes relating to the Hebrew scriptures, and also speaking to the first century church, which was largely mostly people from the sons of Israel. But yeah, that's so yeah, please, I say everyone, just feel free to absolutely use take anything and everything that we've looked at in our work so far, now in our series. Use whatever you want. You have my full permission to take it all, and and be jollified and enrage the coverers while you're at it.
Right. So just looking at this, we see exactly what you have said, that if people had to be familiar with the Bible, and very, very familiar with the Bible, and then when they heard these stories of the Quran, they all made sense. And now here we are in the 21st century, where obviously many things have been mistranslated in the Quran. The dots have been added in the wrong place, just to basically hide the original meaning. But for the original people who actually heard this and wrote this down and stuff, they were very familiar with the Bible, and it was the Quran, something like an apocryphal or something like a targum. It was just giving different, a little bit more of information, say maybe made up information, but it's still, it understood that the audience actually understood the Bible very, very well. And now when we remove that completely and we have imposed a new theology with new stories in the Quran, everything just breaks, nothing makes sense. But for people who knew the Bible well, if they heard the Quran, they understood it. They knew what was going on, including the stories about the apostles and so on. So another thing that I notice is I need to actually take these verses and actually put them all together and see what happens, to see if we get a bit more clarity, because there are stories in the Quran, like with Zechariah. You have stories of Zechariah in Surah 3 and then in Surah 19 and then in another place. Maybe it is just a matter of taking all of these verses and the ones that are relevant and actually just putting them in order. So I need to actually explore that and see if that works. If Muhammad is, or Muhammad is, a title for the resurrected Messiah, then maybe putting things in order will give extra clarity. So leave that one with me. I'll see actually what I can do. But yeah, great. And I think for people watching, feel free to actually go over the previous shows with John, and you will see when he's actually reading each and every single one of those passages, or you can do it as well at home. And because there are so many, it might actually be easier to simply just read the Bible.
That's it, exactly. Because remember, the Quran expects you to. Well, and I guess it just goes to show that you don't have to be a Christian apologist, because the Quran is an apologist for Christianity. And I remember saying right before in the very first episode, I was quoting Sam Shamoon, who says, you never have to defend the Bible because the Quran does it for you. The Quran is ironically a Christian, a biblical, it's a fan. It's a fan of the Bible. It's a very, it's a fan, a very big fan of the Bible. It heavily promotes, the Bible and biblical faith. So there you go. So you've heard it from JC, you've heard it from me, and you've heard it from the Quran. Go read, go ikra the scriptures, which is the Torah, the Injil, and all the prophets.
The Quran is the most Christian book since the Bible.
Yeah, I know, it's an irony.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, and we're going to see more of that. In there. But we've already done this before. That homework in practice, taking that short passage and seeing if see if it fits somewhere else. But to all the viewers, thank you for your stamina. Been doing really well. Grace and peace be with you all.
Right, and this was then the conclusion of the four Muhammad verses, seeing how they're talking in the past tense, some of them, and it's all about the Bible. So I really hope that people enjoyed this say mini series, focusing on those very important verses that talk about Muhammad, or in theory. And please let us know in the comment section below if there are any other things that you've noticed around those verses that will help John enhance his thesis and will help us here on the channel as well find more hidden clues within the Quran. Make sure that you actually let us know and share this work if you can do so safely. Of course, we understand that in many places, many people cannot share things in a way that is safe enough, so don't do it if any harm could come to you. But if you can do it safely, please do so, because it would help us a lot. And in the end, we're all a big family from many different faiths, just digging into these Islamic traditions and trying to find out what really happened 1400 years ago. So John, once again, really phenomenal work. I absolutely love all of this stuff that you are doing, and I don't think that many people, if anyone at all, has ever looked at the Quran just using the lens of the Bible. So please keep up the good work, and I really look forward to having you on next time to explore more of these hidden themes, biblical themes in the Quran.
Glory to the most praised one. So
Indeed,
yeah.
amen. Okay, would you like to say any final words before we call it a day?
Yep. And everyone, please don't. If you are a believer, don't go inverting over your two heels, because Jesus is worth it. He's so good. He is good, and his love endures forever. So, yep. Stay safe, and the peace of the Lord be with you.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, John, for successfully inverting the bid'ah that has been superimposed on the Quran. And everyone at home, thank you very much for watching. Make sure that you click on the notifications button so that you know when we're going to go live next time. And keep an eye out for more of the groundbreaking work that John is bringing to the world. So hopefully we will see you all soon. Thank you very much for watching, and God bless you all. Bye-bye.
There is only one Quran, right? Every Quran in the world is the same. That's what you've been told. You have been told a lie!
Canonical books with 26 off the Quran.
26 different Quran!
There are 0 Dawa guys apparently left on the planet who are willing to defend Muhammad in a debate.
Everybody can go and read it. This is a book full of mistakes in Arabic, in the grammar, in the spelling, in the pronunciation.
Whoever wrote the Quran made an error because they didn't quite understand what was written in the 7th century in the Torah and the Injil.
As promised, I will give you more than 20 reasons why I left Islam in this video.
We know that stories about Muhammad were made up on an industrial scale.
What in the world is this Injil?